Hi there, I'm Beth, and today I'm responding to a lovely request from one of my subscribers. They left a comment on my custom Middie snowdrop video asking for a hoodie pattern with long oversized sleeves. I definitely want to create more patterns for the Middie Blythes, so I was happy to work on it. You've hopefully seen my free Middie long sleeve top pattern already. I used that top as a starting point for drafting this hoodie pattern. I made the sleeves raglan style and tried out a style of hood that I'd seen before but never yet made. I even went ahead and made my looky-loo custom Middie a new dress to match the hoodie I will be making today. Here's the first hoodie I made with this pattern. I used some random scraps of grey lightweight jersey to try it out with. It's got a faux zipper on the front, and you can probably tell these sleeves are just regular sized, based on the same length as my previous free Middie top pattern. So I've looked out some more jersey fabric. You can use an old t-shirt or something, and I'll use the blue stripes for the sleeves and the pink for the rest. Here's the pattern pieces I drafted, just a front, back and sleeve for the body, and a hood piece that will be cut on the fold. I've also got another zipper piece to use. Now you can use a real openable zip for this, but you'll have to cut the top parts down to size. Here's my blue fabric for the sleeves. I'm laying it out with the most stretch being from side to side instead of up and down. Now the pattern here is the shorter sleeve that you saw on the grey hoodie. So draw round this template as it is for that fit. I wanted to make an oversized extra long sleeve, so I'm going to add 3 centimeters to the end of this sleeve, taking the center measurement here from 6 centimeters to 9 centimeters. I draw round the template and cut out 2 sleeves. Next, I'll grab my pink jersey and trace and cut out the remaining pieces. Again, the stretch is from left to right. Here's my back piece and the mirrored front pieces. I'll now manoeuvre the fabric so I can cut the hood on a fold. I cut out the hood and will next cut some material for the cuffs and hem. I'm going to cut mine from the pink fabric so it'll contrast nicely with the sleeves. I'm cutting out a long rectangle that's 2.5 centimeters wide, with the most stretch along the length. It will fold in half like this to turn out and leave a nice finished edge. And I just make sure it's as long as needed. For the assembly of the body, it's fairly simple. Lay out the pieces like this, and with right sides together and a seam allowance of 5mm, sew the front to the sleeve, the back to the sleeve, the next sleeve to the back, and the other front to that sleeve. Then take the hood and fold it right side in like this, Then sew these 2 curved seams, leaving the bottom open. These are very small seams, and I personally don't bother changing any machine settings for the jersey. I used a straight stitch, and I just made sure I put the needle down about 5mm in from the edge to start, then reversed towards the edge before sewing the rest of the seam. I do a few reverse stitches at the end as well. Here's the hood sewn, and I'll be trimming down the seam allowance to about half to reduce bulk. Since the fabric is jersey, it's not prone to fraying. Here's the hoodie body, and if you really wanted to, you could open out the seam allowances and top stitch them either side. But I'll just be trimming them down to about half the width. There we go. And if you're wondering how this style of hood works, we just turn it right side out and then tuck one half into the other. We get a smooth, seamless front then, and minimal bulk. I make sure my seams are centered for getting attached later on. The next step for the hoodie is sewing on the cuffs. I fold the cuff in half, with the fold pointed up the sleeve. Place it on the right side of the sleeve with all the raw edges aligned. On the machine, I'll anchor the needle at one end first, then stretch the cuff tightly before sewing the rest of the seam, reversing a few stitches and then trimming off the excess. The seam allowance is still 5mm, and you see me here pull the cuff tight, but leaving the sleeve fabric relaxed. I hold that tension as I sew and secure the end before releasing and trimming the excess. This gives us the slightly gathered look we usually see on stretch cuffs. Here both cuffs are attached, and I'm going to trim down the bulk of the seam allowance on just 2 layers of fabric, the sleeve and inner cuff layer. I leave the outer seam intact, and you might choose to top stitch it, but I want to use a little fabric glue to secure this, so it stays put when the doll's hands are popping out of the sleeve later. The next step is to close in the sides of the hoodie. I sew from cuff to armpit to hem, pinning them before I sew. Both sides are sewn, and again I trim down the seam allowance and cut little slits into the seam allowance at the armpits to ease the fabric for turning. Here I've pulled my sleeves right side out, and before I continue, I want to be sure to transfer the markings from the template, which show the centre front at the top and bottom. I cut little slits into the fabric to mark these points. Now I grab the remaining cuff material and fold it right sides in so I can sew across one end 5mm in. I can then turn it right side out to have a neat finished end that'll be at one side of the front of the hoodie. I'll align it with the slit and will later bring the facing around it when it's time to sew. First, I'll be stretching the fabric, just like with the cuff, to determine where I need to sew the other end before trimming the excess. Here's the first end of the hem sewn and then turned out. I pin it in place and stretch it towards the other side's slit. I mark that point with a pin and turn it right side in. I will then sew across that point and cut the excess before turning it out. Here it's folded out, and we now have two finished ends for our lower hem. I now pin each end in place at either slit and pin the middle and sides in line with the lower edge. Before sewing, I bring the facing round to sandwich in the hem and pin it in place. It should look like this before sewing. Secure each end well, and afterwards we can turn it right side out to look like this. A neat hem for the hoodie bottom. I want to trim away the excess bulk again though, so as before, I cut just 2 layers of seam allowance so the outer layer can either be top stitched or glued into place. Here's the hoodie so far, with just the upper facings loose and the hood to attach. I will align the hood with the right side of the hoodie neckline, laying my inner hood seams in opposite directions to minimise bulk. I will pin the centre first, then each end in line with the slits, and pin the rest in place. And again, we'll bring the facing round to sandwich the hood before sewing. Here it is once sewn, and we can flip it right side out and carefully push out the corners to see how it looks. Once again, I'm going to trim the excess bulk, leaving one outer layer to glue flat. Please excuse the sun deciding to intensify that moment. Once that's done, there will just be the zip to add. Here that's done, and I have a spare piece of zipper to use for the closure. I cut 2 pieces to size before carefully melting the raw edges with a flame. Adults only for this, of course. Please be careful. I take thread that matches the zip colour and bring it out from the upper corner. I sewed down through the zip, then back up, catching just the tiniest edge of the hoodie front. Each time I sew downward, I only pierce the zip, and upward, I catch the hoodie edge. I found this gives me a near invisible join, which I personally liked for this tiny scale. You could absolutely pin and then top stitch your zip into place instead. Once I got to the bottom, I flipped it over and just whip stitched around the other 3 sides of the zipper tape. I only pierced the facing layer on the backside, so there were no visible stitches from the outside. With this, your hoodie is complete. I don't sew so many modern or casual clothes for my own dolls, so this was a nice change for me. I think the style looks super cute, and especially with the contrasting colour for the sleeves. You could have a lot of fun with colours for this pattern. I chose my short-haired Middie to model the hoodie, to show that you can actually put the hood up as well. The sleeves look adorable, dangling past her hands, but they aren't too long to be scrunched up and worn normally too. I really like how this top came out, and I'm just going to add a little hook and eye closure to the inside at the top in case I want it to sit closed. I do hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you'd like to print out the pattern for yourself and sew it along with me, then check out the link in the video description. You'll find the pattern on my website, and I hope you'll sew your own and share some pictures with me on Instagram using the hashtag BethRamsdenCrafts. Please let me know what you think of this midi-sized hoodie in the comments below. And why not tell me if you have any pattern requests too? Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!